First ray of light touches your face, but you don't feel anything. No gratitude, no excitement, no sense of purpose. There's just a weight on your chest that you can't explain. It's not sadness, and it's not despair. It's something much more elusive: emptiness. You get out of bed, get dressed, eat a tasteless breakfast on autopilot, and step outside to face a day you never really chose to live. You walk into a routine that wasn't built by you. You go to a job that you don't love, surrounded by people who don't truly know you, and everything appears normal. No one screams, no one cries, no one complains. And yet, something deeply silent is dying inside of you. What if that tiredness you feel every day isn't physical? What if it's not stress, not a lack of motivation, not even clinical depression? What if what's slowly draining your spirit is the fact that you're trapped in a life you never consciously chose? Carl Jung once wrote that the greatest danger of modern life is not external chaos, but internal conformity, the slow erosion of the self, the quiet surrender of the soul in exchange for approval, for superficial success, for the validation of a system that punishes individuality. How did we end up here? They told us that we would study, get a job, build a family, save money, and that would be the formula for a good life. But no one ever asked us if that was what we truly wanted. No one taught us to look inward. No one prepared us for the invisible cost of obedience. And now, millions of people walk through life like sleepwalkers, functional, polite, seemingly successful, but empty. Not tired because of what they do, but because of what they have stopped being. There's an invisible trap in our society, one that Jung saw with clarity. The modern individual has no soul, only a function. We are trained to perform, not to feel, to produce, not to question, to conform, not to be. But when was the last time you truly questioned your day-to-day life, your job, your relationships, your goals? Are they really yours? Or were they implanted by a culture that worships efficiency and mocks introspection? Think about it. How many decisions have you made from a place of authenticity? And how many were born from fear? Fear of disappointing others, of failing, of not fitting in. And in that silent fear, how much of yourself have you had to hide? This is not a kind of tiredness that a vacation can fix. It's not something a new business or a self-help book can solve. It's deeper than that. It's the silent scream of a soul begging for a life filled with meaning. It's the shadow of the life you've left behind in the name of doing what others said was right. Modern psychology tries to medicate this discomfort. It gives it clinical names, isolates its symptoms, and tells you it can be managed. But Jung knew something essential. The soul doesn't suffer without reason. Behind the exhaustion, behind the chronic boredom, behind the constant anxiety, there's a terrifying truth that most people don't want to face. The life you're living is not your own. And still, every morning, you repeat the same ritual. Because it's easier to stay asleep than to stare into the abyss of an unlived life. It's more comfortable to be part of the machinery than to stop and ask if that machinery is destroying you. But what if you dared to look beyond the fatigue? What would you discover if you began to undo the social programming that dictates who you're supposed to be? Are you willing to give up the false safety of an acceptable life to start living an authentic one? Because here's something no one ever told you. The soul always knows when it's in prison. And even if you can't hear it screaming, the silence is heavy. It consumes you. It drains you. Until one day, you may finally wake up, only to realize it's already too late. And it is precisely in that existential silence that the real journey begins. Because this is not just an emotional issue. It's a deep psychological phenomenon with philosophical roots that have been growing silently for centuries. And now, it's time to unearth those roots so that you can see what has always been there, waiting for you to confront it. The hidden problem and its psychological origins. There is a silent tragedy that plays out in millions of souls every day. It doesn't appear in medical textbooks. It can't be diagnosed in a 15-minute consultation. But it consumes life from within. The disconnection between who we are and the life we live. Carl Jung referred to it as alienation from the self, a deeply human phenomenon where the individual becomes so detached from their inner essence that they begin to live behind a mask that smiles, functions, interacts, and even succeeds, while deep within, the soul is crying out, unheard and unseen. This mask becomes so well rehearsed that even we start to believe it's who we really are. But beneath the surface, there's a silent agony, a sense of falseness, of not belonging in our own lives. How do we arrive at such a fractured state? It doesn't happen suddenly or dramatically. It begins in childhood, and not necessarily through acts of violence or overt neglect, but through something far more subtle and insidious: conditional love. We learn from a very young age that our worthiness, our value, and even our right to be loved is linked to our ability to obey, to please, to fit expectations. And so, bit by bit, we build a socially acceptable personality. We become what others want us to be. In doing so, we begin to amputate parts of ourselves that don't fit into that mold. We silence our sensitivity, hide our anger, ignore our intuition, dismiss our odd dreams, and suppress the questions that made adults uncomfortable. Every piece we deny, every trait we hide, is a surrender to survival in a world that rewards conformity over authenticity. And in the name of adaptation, we repress the very elements that make us whole. Jung issued a warning: what you deny submits you. What you accept transforms you. Yet modern society does not encourage acceptance. It promotes denial. It trains us to conceal our deeper truths, to disconnect from our rawness, our vulnerability, our instincts. We're taught to amputate parts of the soul in exchange for acceptance, success, and belonging. And with every internal compromise, we become more polished on the outside and more hollow within. This is not a new crisis. Thinkers before Jung saw the same spiritual fracture. Nietzsche called it the morality of the slave, a way of living rooted in obedience, fear, and the desperate need for external validation. Schopenhauer described it as the veil of illusion, a life caught in endless desire, never reaching true peace. Sartre called it bad faith, the self-deception of living a life that denies our radical freedom to choose who we are. But Jung went deeper. He realized that the root of the problem is not only cultural, but also deeply psychological. It lies in the collective unconscious, a vast inner landscape made of symbols, archetypes, and inherited psychological structures that shape us from within, long before we are aware of them. According to Jung, every soul carries a unique path, a journey called individuation. It is the sacred process of integrating all parts of the self, even those we were forced to reject, abandon, or hide. Yet the modern world has no space for this inner journey. Our educational systems do not teach introspection. Our work environments rarely reward authenticity, and our family systems, often unconsciously, repeat cycles of trauma under the guise of love. So, what do we do in the face of this absence? we adapt. We build efficient, productive, agreeable identities. We become what the world demands of us. And in doing so, we forget who we were before the world told us who we needed to be. This is the deep root of the exhaustion you feel. It is not physical fatigue. It is a hunger of the soul. A tension between the life you are living and the life your soul came here to experience. A dissonance between your outer performance and your inner truth. And the most tragic irony, many people try to cure this spiritual emptiness with even more effort. They chase goals, start routines, follow diets, rearrange their lives, believing that if they just improve enough, that emptiness will vanish. But the soul cannot be nourished by achievements. You cannot heal the wounded parts of your spirit with productivity. The shadow that lives within you, the parts of yourself you denied, shamed, and exiled, does not disappear because your to-do list is complete. No external accomplishment can fill an internal void. The only path forward is inward, to pause, to listen, to feel the things you've numbed, to reclaim the pieces of yourself you once disowned, to move beyond the mask and remember the face underneath. The truth is, your soul has never stopped calling. It's been whispering through your anxiety, your discontent, your restlessness, not as punishment, but as a guide, because your real self is not lost. It's buried under layers of expectation, fear, and forgotten dreams, and all it wants is to come home. But you cannot fill a hole in the soul with accomplishments. You cannot silence the shadow with productivity. Carl Jung taught that the shadow is not evil itself, but rather the suppressed, the parts of ourselves we exile. What you hide does not vanish. It transforms into exhaustion, anxiety, and self-sabotage. It becomes that quiet inner voice whispering, "This makes no sense," the one you've trained yourself to ignore. And then one day, you feel drained. You look in the mirror and no longer recognize the eyes staring back. You are still breathing, but you're no longer living. You function like a cog in a machine you don't understand, one you don't know how to escape. Jung echoed what Viktor Frankl also understood. When meaning is absent, we become addicted to distraction. Pleasure, power, or validation become substitutes. That explains much of today's behavior. The compulsive use of social media, the fear of solitude, the constant comparison, the obsession with becoming someone in the eyes of others. Beneath it all lies the same root. We have lost contact with the soul. Jung said, the soul doesn't scream, it whispers, and if you ignore its voice, it will slowly drain you from within. That is the deeper issue. You are not tired because of what you do. You are tired because of what you are suppressing while doing it. You have been conditioned to serve the system, not yourself. And unless that truth is confronted, the inner void will only expand. Nothing outside of you can ever fill it. Now that you've glimpsed the hidden roots of your fatigue, a more urgent question emerges. What is this emptiness doing to you without you realizing it? Because its effects are not just felt, they ripple into how you love, how you work, how you quietly abandon your own dreams. In the next moments, you'll see how this invisible wound is shaping every part of your life without your awareness. Its invisible consequences. You don't see it. It has no color or shape, but it is there, in your tone of voice, in how you connect with others, in what you dream, or more precisely, in what you no longer dare to dream. When you're trapped in a life you never chose, every part of you adapts to the prison. Your language becomes dull. Your emotions become numb. The light in your eyes dims. And most dangerous of all, You stop thinking for yourself. You begin to echo truths you never questioned, defend beliefs you never truly felt, pursue goals that were never yours. But this doesn't happen overnight. The soul does not surrender in a single moment. It retreats quietly, in layers, like an animal that slowly learns resistance is futile. First, you let go of small desires. Then, you silence your discomfort. Later, you justify your apathy, until one day, weariness feels normal, and resignation starts to look like virtue. Carl Jung warned that the greatest threat to the human psyche is not open trauma, but the slow, quiet detachment from its own center. When you no longer know what you want, when you no longer know who you are, when you live without desire, without fire, without questions. This is not maturity, it is surrender. And surrender has real consequences. First, you lose your sense of time. When you start living a life that isn't truly yours, the days begin to blur. One day fades into the next, and suddenly, it's impossible to distinguish between Monday and Wednesday. Even weekends lose their meaning. Saturday, once a symbol of rest or joy, becomes just another slot in your calendar. Life turns into a repetitive cycle of tasks, obligations, and routines, devoid of emotional memory. Time no longer feels like something you experience. It becomes a conveyor belt you're forced to ride. You wake up, go through the motions, and go to bed, all while wondering if anything truly happened. You're alive, technically, but not really living. Second, your self-image becomes distorted. The person you once were, the vibrant, curious feeling self, starts to disappear behind layers of masks and expectations. You begin to question who you are, but not in a deep, philosophical way. It's a more disorienting, empty kind of doubt. You wonder if you're an introvert or just exhausted from pretending. You can't tell if you've stopped loving or if you've simply forgotten how to receive love in your current emotional state. Your talents, once so clear, now seem distant or delusional. Your boundaries blur. Your self-worth crumbles. You can't recognize the person in the mirror, not because they've changed, but because you've drifted so far from yourself that even your own reflection feels like a stranger. Third, you start connecting with others from a place of lack. When your soul feels fractured, you instinctively reach outside of yourself, desperately seeking what you've lost within. You search for validation, for direction, for a sense of purpose, but not because others owe it to you. It's because you've forgotten how to find it within yourself. And that's where relationships begin to suffer. Bonds born from emptiness are fragile. They are rooted in need, not connection. This is how codependency starts. Toxic dynamics emerge. Desperate attachments form, not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being alone, of being unseen, of being unloved. You cling, not because you care too much, but because you no longer know what it feels like to be whole on your own. Fourth, you begin to escape constantly into food, into endless scrolling, into porn, into meaningless entertainment, into impulsive shopping, into anything that numbs the silence within. Not because you're lazy or weak, but because the pain of being disconnected from your true self is unbearable. Neuroscience supports this. When we live in dissonance, when our outer actions contradict our inner desires, the brain enters a state of chronic stress. Survival circuits kick in. Cortisol levels rise. Natural dopamine production drops. You end up walking through life in a state of constant alertness, even though there's no visible threat. You're tired, irritated, indifferent. But you don't understand why. You just know that something inside feels wrong. broken. Society calls this adulthood. But Carl Jung had another name for it: disindividuation, the reverse of soul growth. It's the unraveling of who you are meant to be. And here lies the cruelest irony. The more successful you become by society's standards, the more you risk betraying yourself. The more functional you appear, the more disconnected you might actually be. The more praise you receive, the deeper your truth might be buried under layers of conformity and performance. And so, the emptiness grows, not from failure, but from succeeding at things that don't align with your essence. This existential void doesn't only show up in big life decisions. It creeps into the small ones too. You accept jobs that drain you. You maintain friendships that deplete you. You repeat habits that quietly destroy you. You say yes when everything in your body screams no. And the worst part? You justify it all with words like maturity, realism, responsibility. You convince yourself this is what it means to be an adult. But deep down, beneath all the logic and defense mechanisms, you know something's off. You know you weren't born to be a shadow of your true self. You know that another kind of life is possible, but that it's a path that won't reveal itself through conformity or comfort. Psychiatrist Gabor Mate, in his work on trauma, explains something profoundly important. When a person has to choose between authenticity and belonging, they will almost always choose belonging. Why? Because being rejected for who you are is more painful than pretending to be someone else. And so, from a young age, we learn to betray our authenticity to avoid the terror of abandonment. But this survival mechanism comes with a cost. You become a more palatable version of yourself, a version that's acceptable, tolerable, normal. And after a while, you forget what it ever felt like to be truly yourself. And now, here we are, an entire generation that is confused, anxious, high-performing, yet empty. People who've done everything right, but still feel like something's missing. People who've followed the script: education, job, relationships, success, only to arrive at a place that feels hollow. And the consequences aren't waiting somewhere in the future. They are already here, showing up in your thoughts, your emotions, your choices, your restlessness, your fatigue. They are woven into the way you exist, right now. If you don't change the internal landscape, it won't matter how many times you switch careers, how many relationships you end, how many countries you move to. You will carry the same feeling wherever you go. Because the real prison isn't outside of you, it's inside. And escape doesn't come from rearranging the external. It comes from a deeper, quieter form of revolution. But this isn't where the story ends. There is a way out. There is a silent rebellion, one that doesn't begin with rage or destruction, but with a question. A brave, unfiltered, soul-shaking question. What would happen if I stopped being who the world expects and started being who I truly am? This is where transformation begins, not with quitting your job or walking away from everything. That's just another form of avoidance. Real rebellion doesn't require you to burn your life down. It requires you to wake up within it. It asks you to sit with the discomfort instead of escaping it, to be honest instead of agreeable, to choose yourself, moment by moment, even when the world wants someone else. And it all begins with a single question, one that pierces through years of conditioning, performance, and silence. What if everything I've ever called me isn't really me at all? Carl Jung believed that the process of individuation, the journey toward your true self, is neither comfortable, nor linear, nor socially endorsed. It's more like a descent into the underworld, where you're forced to confront everything you've denied, repressed, forgotten. Your shadow, your real desire, your rawest truth. It's the hero's path, not of playing a role, but of daring to write one's own story. And where does it begin? Not with answers, but with brutal honesty, with a pause, with the kind of silence that lets you hear that voice you've been avoiding for years. Yes, that one. The voice that visits you at dawn when sleep won't come. The one that whispers when you look into the mirror and no longer recognize yourself. The voice that quietly asks, "Is this it? Is this really the life you came here to live?" Jung taught that every deep transformation begins when the urge to be yourself becomes stronger than the fear of not belonging. When the pain of falsehood outweighs the risk of being real. And this is where most people falter. They want transformation without confrontation, healing without discomfort, evolution without loss. But no true self can be built on a false foundation. The first act of rebellion, then, is to feel fully, to allow the void to ache, the anxiety to speak, the sadness to scream, without numbing yourself with distractions. Because behind every emotion you fear lies the version of you that you've forgotten. The second act is to question without fear. What would I do if I didn't need to please anyone? What choices have I made from fear and which from true desire? What part of myself am I still hiding to be loved? These questions don't come with quick answers, but each one cracks the walls of the prison. Each one melts the mask a little more. Then comes the hardest part, acting differently. Even if your voice trembles, even if detachment hurts, even if the world doesn't understand. Maybe you say no for the first time to something you always accepted. Maybe you choose art over money. Maybe you allow yourself to cry in front of someone. Or maybe you just stare at your reflection and admit, "I don't know who I am, but I'm ready to find out." That is freedom. Not a life without rules, but one with rules that are your own. A life where every step, every relationship, every decision is aligned with your inner truth. And yes, it will hurt. You'll lose things, people, whole chapters of your life that no longer resonate. But you'll gain something priceless, yourself. Carl Jung echoed Nietzsche in saying that he who has a why to live can bear almost any how. But your why can't be borrowed. It can't be inherited, taught, or approved by others. It must rise from within you like a flame no one can extinguish. And that flame, even if small, is enough to light your path. Becoming yourself is not becoming someone new. It's remembering who you were before the world told you who you should be. It's reclaiming your voice, your desire, your sacred madness for a life with meaning. And when you start walking that path, something shifts. You no longer need endless distractions. You stop measuring yourself by achievements. You don't beg for validation like a starving child. You begin to live with purpose. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're finally asking the right questions. And then, the unexpected happens. Fatigue turns into energy, anxiety into clarity, confusion into direction. Why? Because you're no longer betraying yourself. Because for the first time, you're truly on your own side. But there's still one thing left. A realization so deep, so essential, it can rewrite your entire story. It's not a tip or a technique. It's a truth that changes how you see life, suffering, and your role in this world. In the next and final part, we will reveal it. The supreme truth, the final realization. What if suffering wasn't a mistake, but a message? What if every piece of anguish, every sleepless night, Every silent sigh was trying to tell you something you've long forgotten. The deepest truth Carl Jung ever uncovered isn't only found in his theories or even his books. In this life you lead, it's not about running away from pain or avoiding discomfort. Rather, it is about facing it head-on, about dedicating yourself to unraveling the mysteries that lie within your suffering. What you discover in that process is both beautifully simple and profoundly terrifying. The clarity you seek, true clarity, can only come when you dare to look deep inside your own heart. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." This awakening is precisely what you have been avoiding or postponing. For so long, you believed your exhaustion stemmed from external sources. The pressures of work, the relentless demands of life, the shadows of your past, the overwhelming stress that seems to follow you everywhere. But now, finally, you see it for what it is. That exhaustion isn't physical, it is spiritual. It is the weight of living out of alignment with the deepest needs of your soul. Your body may show signs of wear and tear, but it is your soul that is truly weary, ignored, silenced, and disconnected from the purpose it longs to fulfill. And your mind, fractured and scattered, loses its way when it loses sight of why you are here in the first place. The modern world has conditioned you to look outside yourself for everything. For love, for meaning, for validation, for peace. It has turned you into a seeker, a consumer endlessly chasing solutions in the external world. Quick fixes, distractions, temporary comforts, when in truth, all of these things were meant to be found within you. You have always been the creator of your own answers, the originator of your own truth. Yet, you forgot this fundamental fact. Here lies the ultimate truth. Your soul was never meant to fit neatly into a box, to conform, to simply function like a cog in a machine. It came here to expand, to grow, to be fully alive in all its messy, beautiful complexity. Every time you denied this truth, every time you tried to squeeze yourself into roles or expectations that felt unnatural, you broke a little more. But the good news is that the path back is not out there somewhere. It is already inside you. Remember who you were before fear took hold, before duty and shoulds dictated your life. You are not your job. You are not your past trauma. You are not your successes or your failures. You are the consciousness that quietly watches all of it unfold. You are the soft voice that whispers truth in the silence, the spark that refuses to go out even when darkness feels all-encompassing. That spark, that indestructible core, which Jung called the self, is exactly what you came here to manifest. You were never meant to simply survive. You came here to individuate, to slowly become the whole, complete expression of who you truly are. Light and shadow, chaos and order, instinct and soul, all parts of one magnificent being. When you finally embrace this wholeness, the internal battles cease. The exhaustion that once consumed you begins to fade because you are no longer pretending to be someone you're not. Anxiety loosens its grip because you've stopped running in endless circles. What once felt like emptiness reveals itself as sacred space. What you once interpreted as pain now shows up as guidance, a teacher helping you navigate your path. The chaos that seemed unbearable becomes the very ground upon which you rebuild yourself, stronger and wiser. And in this moment, everything makes sense. Every misstep, every dark night of the soul, every moment of doubt, all of it was leading you here, to this exact understanding. You are not broken. You are remembering. You are not lost. You are waking up. And when this awakening takes place, when you stop running from yourself and start truly inhabiting your being, the world around you changes too. Not because the world itself has transformed, but because you are no longer the same person looking at it. This is the ultimate realization. The freedom, the peace, the sense of belonging you have been seeking in the outside world has always been inside you. It was never lost. It was just buried beneath layers of fear and conditioning. So breathe. You don't need to fix everything today. You don't need to accomplish it all at once. You only need to come back to yourself, to feel what you have been avoiding, to face what you have silenced, and to be what you have hidden away. This is your revolution. This is your act of love. This is your true homecoming. You are not tired. You are simply coming home. If you've made it this far, it's no coincidence. Something is stirring within you, an awakening that perhaps you hadn't fully recognized before. It means that a part of your inner self is beginning to change, to grow, and to seek something greater, something that transcends the daily grind. This moment you're experiencing is a sign, a nudge from your own consciousness, telling you that you're ready to explore new perspectives, question old beliefs, and open the door to transformation. I invite you to take a moment and share in the comments which part of this message moved you the most. Your reflections are not only valuable to you, but can also become a beacon of light for those walking a similar path. Sometimes, when we express what resonates with us, we create a ripple of inspiration that can reach souls far beyond our imagination. Your words could be just what someone else needs to hear right now, a source of encouragement, a spark of hope, or simply the reassurance that they are not alone. If this message has resonated with you, if it has made you reflect, please consider supporting this channel in whatever way feels right for you. Whether it's by clicking the subscribe button, activating the notification bell, or simply participating and sharing, your energy and participation are the fuel that keeps this content flowing. Every little bit of support helps these ideas and reflections reach more hearts and minds, reaching those who need them most. The energy you contribute here is more powerful than you know. It helps maintain a space where consciousness can grow, where deeper understanding can flourish, and where the seeds of change can be planted. By being part of this community, you become a common thread that unites those seeking meaning, growth, and transformation. So thank you, not only for watching and listening, but for being here, for being open, and for being willing to embark on this journey of awakening alongside others. Your presence matters, and together we can continue to build a space where truth, inspiration, and healing continue to spread.